up?
I'm Bianca.
And I'm Adrian.
And we're two independent, creative women living in New York City, going through a lot of stuff.
And that's why we're here, to share our experiences with you, and hopefully you can learn something from it.
Or you can laugh with us.
In this episode of Season 2 of Women in the Wild,
what are we talking about?
We are talking about our quarantine experience. So in our last season, we kind of closed it out with doing it over FaceTime, and we're here now. We're filming in June, so we're going to be talking about our quarantine experiences since Bianca and I both had pretty similar experiences, but also different during different times of the quarantine. So one similarity is moving. So I moved during the beginning of quarantine, and you moved, so that was around April 15, or like in the beginning of April, and then you moved
for June.
For the month of June. So
although it was a process that came since like mid-April when I found out I had to move.
Yeah, so it's kind of like been a process of figuring out what suited each of us best. And yeah, we're going to talk about that. So moving, some kind of like dating a little bit during quarantine, which was...
We know you want the deets.
Yeah, because how does that even work? And I guess those were our questions in the beginning of... I guess even in like March, like towards the end of March, we were already trying to figure out those things. Even getting tested for COVID, both getting tested for COVID and antibody testing. So you got your testing during the beginning of quarantine, and I just got my tests done maybe like not even 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. That's our episode for today, so stay tuned for some more because we're going to get right into it. All right.
Episode 1,
season 2. That's exciting. Okay, so when was the last time we filmed our episode? That was I moved out April. And then did we do one episode?
We did like 2 episodes after you moved, I think.
It's been a bit.
Yeah. I think the last 2 episodes were, through Anchor, the app. You from your house and me from mine.
Yeah, so it's been about 2 months since we've really filmed anything. So yeah, it's good to be back and actually beside you, not online. Yeah. Also, she braided my hair for anybody watching on video. So yeah, get yourself a friend like Bianca. But yeah, so we're gonna talk about our quarantine experience, and I'll start since I moved first. Okay, so one of the things that I wrote down on my notes was just how quickly things changed. It was a situation for so let me give you a backstory, I guess, for the viewers and the listeners. During the beginning of quarantine, I actually moved back here in January on a month-to-month situation in Brooklyn. So this was in Bushwick, and when I lived there, I had lived there before, and you know this, but I moved with my friends Alex and Chris, and there were 5 of us, all creatives, living in one household. It would have been the most ideal situation. We were super excited to re-sign a lease for April 2020 to 2021, but it ended up not happening last minute because my friends Alex and Chris, they already moved to LA. They were already there for a couple months traveling. Also, they have family over there. And when all of this when the pandemic kind of started getting worse, they decided, okay, it's financially more smart for us to remain in LA. They're both actors. Right. So for them, it just made sense. And that meant that, and then one of our roommates was also moving out. So we had 4 bedrooms. And then one's already for sure leaving, and then Alex and Chris backed out. So now we have 2 rooms vacant, and it's just me and my other roommate Manny left. And it's okay, the second that Alex and Chris started to decide okay, we're not renewing, and then started selling all their furniture, when the TV was gone, we were okay, it's time to move out. We never really used the TV, but it was that was the moment that we realized that it's not going to be the same because we're not friends. It's easier for us to look for an apartment individually rather than trying to fill the 2 rooms that apartment had. So then I went on Facebook. There's this like thing for artists and creative communities where you can search for month-to-month sublets or even some leases. It's called Ghostlight Housing, and then there's one Gypsy Housing. Super like flexible situation. So if you're ever new to New York and kind of want to test things out, I super suggest like things like Facebook, even Craigslist. Like that's where I found my very first apartment 4 years ago.
Me too.
Was on Craigslist.
In Sunnyside, Queens.
Yes, and stay tuned for more of season 2 because we will be talking about New York and like how we ended up living here and like why we love living here. Even through a pandemic, we moved and all of this crazy things. So I found my apartment through Facebook. I was interviewing with a couple. I almost moved to Astoria because
I remember.
Right? There was a place for $650. It had a window.
The perks in New York are
it's like a window.
Things. It's like you're gonna move somewhere that has a window. Like, yes, that's New York for you. That's a perk. That's a privilege here.
And like it's technically illegal actually to live in technically a room with no windows is not a room.
Oh, that doesn't apply to New York.
Oh, that doesn't apply to New York City, of course. So just, it's out there. But it was $650 for like a month. So that wasn't bad. So coming off of like something super last minute, I was like, okay, this doesn't sound too bad. So I almost considered it. And then I interviewed with 7 other apartments. Ultimately, I decided to be near where I moved. So I moved from Bushwick to East Williamsburg, which is still kind of Bushwick. So maybe about like a 5-minute drive from my place. And everything ended up working out from there. So I got really lucky. My roommates now, so I still live with 3 other people. But that's just like a personal preference. I want to live with other people just because it's fun. You meet people that way, and as much as possible, like we all get along. So I got really lucky with that. But yeah, so I still live around Bushwick, and I decided that ultimately because all my friends were in this area. It's easy to get into Manhattan. I'm familiar with it, and plus my simple joys are bike riding all over New York City. So being familiar with the area also helps. So those were like my factors of deciding and like looking online. I guess if you wanted to have some tips, I guess one factor I considered was budget. Because when I did move, I wanted to make sure that I had the right amount of space. One priority I had was outdoor spaces, and it wasn't like a luxury because I knew that I'd always be out. So immediately crossed off, like that's why that place was the one in Astoria didn't work out, was because it had a window, but they didn't have a rooftop, no courtyard, nothing. Exactly. And right now my apartment has a rooftop and a courtyard. Yeah, so super important.
And you were close to me.
And I was close to you.
Astoria is so far from here. Imagine doing the podcast with you being in Astoria.
No, and I don't really know anybody there. I think it was also like a comfort zone because my very first apartment was in Bushwick. So it was also just that budget. When I rented the U-Haul truck, I just got like a 9-foot one, the ones that look like kidnap vans. I mean, I also just recommend that. I mean, I lived in I had a twin bed, some furniture, and things like that. And I was able to keep it for 24 hours. And I think I paid under $80 for everything. That's beautiful. Yeah, because my mileage, I didn't even reach 10 miles because my old place was so new to my new apartment. So even that, like I did so many like back and forth trips. And I was like, if I forget something, I can come back for it. It's so close. Like that was key. And I moved to a 2nd floor apartment. So it was easy to bring up furniture because like your apartment right now, it's a 4-floor walk up. But you'll talk about it later how your place is fully furnished. So not a big factor. Yeah, so like I moved, everything kind of like worked out. I guess one of the things that sounded all super positive, but during the beginning, I was like, I can't believe I have to move. I was so excited.
Excited for the move?
I mean, I was so excited to like remain in the old apartment and for Alex and Chris to come back because this was going to be like our creative year, like creative household. We're all close friends. Like,
yeah, Corona doesn't care about your plan.
Exactly. So it was just like, wow, there 3 days straight where I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this would
Yeah.
have been the most ideal situation ever. And then, like, in one day, like, over one phone call, like, sorry, guys, like, we're not going to renew. And you can blame them because it's like, Corona doesn't pick or choose, like, what you want to do. It's just you got to go with the flow and respect other people's plans and, like, what decisions they can make for themselves because everyone's different. We had the same, like, exact situations, but we dealt with it in such different ways, and it ended up working out for both of us, you know.
Yeah.
And it's the same for them, where, like, they have family in LA and things like that. So yeah, it was, like, all in all a good experience. It was just weird to be with masks and gloves, and then
talk about the experience of moving during the pandemic. Like, how was it different?
I guess, well, it was nice with the U-Haul thing because it was contactless pickup. The only thing was that it took more time because every time you would have to, like, disinfect the steering wheel and the dollies and all these things. And then when you also enter and re-enter your building, you have to think. And this was, like, during the beginning of the pandemic, so we didn't really know a lot about the virus then. Whereas, like, now, though it's still happening, we're not less cautious, but at least we're not as paranoid because the testing is more accessible now and things like that. Whereas before, we really didn't know. This was super in the beginning. So we were very cautious during the time that I was moving in the beginning of April. But it was just like everybody just had masks. And at the time, masks weren't a thing. So, like, all these ones with the patterns and designs and all the crazy things, the cloth ones, those didn't exist at the time. So we were just, like, in bandanas, and it was really silly. Like, it wasn't even, like, medical grade. So those were, like, the only weird things. And also, I had to quarantine strictly about 10 days before I actually moved because I was moving into a place with 3 new other people, so out of respect to them. No, kind of just, like, out of respect, that's like, okay, I'm gonna limit my activity as much as possible. So I got all of my boxes. Remember, I did a trip to Home Depot, I did my trip to Ace Hardware, got all my moving boxes, and then sheltered in. And that was, like, the plan. That was, like, I guess the only weird thing is that I had to be really logistic about the materials that I needed for moving, mattress covers and things like that you wouldn't really think about, tape, industrial bags to, like, throw away. And also because Alex and Chris, since they were already in LA, Manny, my other roommate who remained in New York and occupied the other room, we helped them pack up their stuff. So we didn't pack up just our things, we helped 2 other people move in the process. And then the other roommate that vacated, she left all of her furniture when she shouldn't have.
That was a mess.
So we had to break it down and empty out her room too, even though she already moved out.
That roommate was a mess.
Yeah. So it was just, like, a lot of work. All in all, it worked out. And that's why it's kind of nice to talk about it, like, 2.5 months later.
Yeah.
It felt so stressful in the beginning, but now knowing that I'm so comfortable in my new place, like, I have washer and dryer in unit, a rooftop, a courtyard, roommates who actually give a shit about me. And, like, I thought that I wasn't going to find that because the roommates that I moved in with have been friends of mine for, like, over 2 years. And that was the one thing that I was super skeptical about. But now it's, like, kind of like, oh, we can really build towards a good relationship. We've gone to the farmers markets together, like, picked up plants and things. So it's been good. Like, we've done movie nights, share food. So it worked out. So basically, that's my quarantine story. I mean, I'm sure a lot more people moved during the quarantine because when we were trying to figure out a month-to-month situation and trying to renew our lease or figure out a deal with our landlord, there were, like, FAQs on the New York government website about how, like, oh, what if my lease expires March 31st and then my landlord won't do month-to-month? So I'm sure a lot of people went through, like, some version of it, but tell me about your experience.
First of all, that's true. Like, so many people's leases ended, like, right when quarantine started. I think people just like to rent in the summer or spring. So, like, most people's leases were up around that time, like April. And mine was due, like, it ended in April too. So at the time, I still had my roommate, and we discussed like, should we do month to month moving forward because we don't really know what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
And so we asked for that, and the landlord said yes, which was cool.
Yeah, because my landlord did not
Yeah,
even let us. No,
that's
it was
crazy.
not an option.
That's so mean. Like, anyway, my friends, some family members, my mom, everyone in the yard was telling me that there's a quarantine that they force on people who come in to the country from a different country. Um, and it's not in your house, it's like in some building next to the airport. And like
a facility?
Yeah.
A quarantine facility.
And like the minimum time that you have to spend there is 15 days, which is half a month. And it doesn't matter if you have the coronavirus or not, or if you have antibodies or not. Like, nothing matters. Just everyone who came into the country was put in quarantine in this facility. And I was like, that sounds horrible. I don't want to do that. Like, I'd rather like crash at a family member's place here in New York or something than like spend 15 days in a facility by myself, surrounded by people that could very possibly have the coronavirus. Like, that sounds horrible. And also, like, I'm going to the ER maybe for like what I think will be a month. So if that does happen, like if I stay for a month in Dominican Republic, that would have meant that half the time or half of my time in Dominican Republic would have been in a freaking facility by myself. Like, no. So I was like, okay, plan A didn't work. Plan B didn't work. Time to make a plan C. And I was so scared because it really seemed like there was nothing I could do like for plan C, other than maybe sublet a room in an apartment. Which, by the way, I just want to add this. I started looking at that option, so I went to Gypsy Housing and all those Facebook things that you mentioned. And I did find that there were so many people in that same situation, which is crazy. Like, the coronavirus, like, really shaked things up for everyone.
That's
like,
what I'm saying.
not just
I went on
us.
7 interviews because it was so quick. I found an apartment. Yeah, Alex and Chris told me that they wanted to back out March 28th. March 29th, they started selling their things on Facebook. And then by then we were like, okay, we're giving our 30 days notice. Like, Manny and I both were like, we're giving our 30 days notice. We're done with this.
It was crazy. And I did a couple of interviews and I found a few nice places, but they were all like close to 1,000, if not 1,000, like per month. So, I mean, it was a good option. But then basically me and my mom found a company that does like shared living spaces. Like, this is one of them.
And they're fully furnished.
And they're fully furnished and they're low cost. And the most important thing is that they have very short leases. That's what sold it for me because I still wanted to go to DR. It was not like I was gonna resettle somewhere. It's just like I just need a few months to like wait until DR doesn't do that quarantine thing anymore. So that's how I found this place. Like, we looked at some options that the company was offering, and this one was very affordable. And like, this one is even cheaper than some of the sublet rooms I was looking at. So it just wouldn't make sense for me to go sublet somewhere that's like with random people and like with none of the services that this company does offer, because we do have like a cleaning lady and it's fully furnished and it's nice and it's like wide spaces and like a lot of perks. So I was like, yeah, that's the best option.
In good neighborhoods too. In good pockets
good neighborhood,
of like the neighborhoods
yeah.
too.
Convenient. Laundry, like it had what I was looking for. And basically they were gonna do it, like I was able to do it for a 2-month lease, which is perfect. So I was like, okay, I can just stay June and July in New York, and then in August I'll go to DR. Like, by August things have to be okay to go to DR. And I was right. They actually, like, the DR already announced that in August everything should be open, like even tourism. Like, you can even go to resorts and stuff, which is great because I actually want to go to the beach. Yeah. So it worked out, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're filming in this beautiful living room. The coronavirus actually helped me with the selling of the stuff because IKEA is closed and like every store is closed, right? So a lot of these people that we mentioned that are going through the same thing where they have to like leave their current homes and move somewhere else and blah blah. a lot of people actually need furniture because people are just relocating all over New York to like a cheaper place or whatever.
And they don't need new furniture if you're moving to a cheaper place.
But a lot of people like actually needed new furniture to like for their moves. And since no stores are open, I feel like people were using apps and like Facebook groups and stuff like that more than ever.
Yeah.
And my stuff got sold super fast. Like one of the first things I sold were like the bigger furniture stuff, like the beds, 2 beds, the dressers, the desks. Those were like the first things, which are like big things that people usually buy when they're like moving into a new place. So it made sense. And I was surprised.
We like took good photos of all your stuff.
Yeah, this girl took photos of all my furniture, which was super cool and helpful. Not only were we going through moves during the pandemic, we were also going through relationships during the pandemic. Gosh. This is Women in the Wild podcast. We have to talk about men.
Yeah, we do. Growth, we don't men, everything.
Both Adrian and I were kind of starting to see a guy each.
Each a guy, yeah.
At the beginning of the pandemic. So I think this is where our stories differ a little bit because it's a really great contrast between both relationships. Like yours was affected negatively by the pandemic and mine was positively. So why don't you tell yours first?
Oh, mine first. Okay. So this guy, well, because I was recently single when I moved back to New York. The dudes I was seeing before this guy, we were kind of just like would just stay at home or like watch things and be boring and like stay indoors kind of thing. But then the dude during the pandemic, we would actually go out on dates. Like we wouldn't just do the stupid casual things that you would expect out of dating apps. So I was like, oh, this is refreshing, like nice. So I feel like I'm being treated right. But at the end of the day, it's like, that's what we're learning, right? It's like being treated right doesn't mean that it's like, oh, you should...
The right person.
The right person. That's it. So that, I was like, oh, I'm just enjoying being treated like, it's like, no, I should be treated this way. And now moving forward, that's actually what I would expect. And I wouldn't want to...
Like, that shouldn't be like special. That's just the minimum.
Exactly. That's just the minimum.
Hello.
Yeah, inadequate. So at the end of the day, I'm actually glad that like fizzled out in the beginning of it, because then...
But tell us how it fizzled out because of the pandemic.
Okay, so I guess it was like weird. So that was also the time that I was moving. So he said something weird too. Remember this text, and when I bring this up, you'll be like, oh yeah, he said that. I was telling him, oh, like I'm all of a sudden like I'm moving, so then I have all these things happening, and I'm like really busy. And then he was saying like, oh well, and he's like, okay, I remember. I was telling him like, oh, I have these options. I might go to the Philippines, because I was also thinking about it at that time. It's like I might actually just go to the Philippines or go to my aunt in San Francisco and stay there instead of rent an apartment here in New York. Ultimately, we know what we decided. I cannot leave New York. I love New York. And so he texted me. He was like, oh, well, I'm so sorry to hear that, but A, we only just met, otherwise I'd offer you this place. B, like, it's like all these things, and it's like, I never asked you to shelter me or save me or provide a home for me. Like, first of all, you saw my messages before that. I had so many options. My aunt, Philippines, subletting, so many options.
You could have even stayed with me.
I could have stayed with you. There were like just so many things, and it's not like I couldn't afford to go move out and find my own place. Like,
and also you didn't ask for
and
his help.
I never asked. I was like, oh, can I sleep over your... Like, no, there is no such thing. And he's just like, first, we just met. Like, I'd offer you my place, but no.
That's
no,
so
no,
rude.
no, no. That's so rude. It's like... And then he was just like, first... ABC,
Yeah.
like, okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, goodbye.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, goodbye.
Yeah, that's it. Gosh, okay, what's your thing? So mine was like, so the contrast that you were talking about was that mine kind of like fizzled out and didn't turn into anything, even though I had really good high hopes.
Yeah.
And then what's the contrast to your story?
So I think both of our stories start very similar in the sense that what I liked was that I was going on really cool dates. Like before coronavirus, it was already good before the virus. We were going on like awesome dates. It was just like very fresh. Actually, our last date was in Westlight. We went there for a Daybreaker.
Yeah, we did. It was
so like the
amazing.
restaurant right below the roof, and that was our last date before quarantine. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was like, we need to do a girls' brunch.
Yes,
somewhere. Maybe
yes.
not in Westlight. Somewhere. Rooftop brunches. That's what I miss. Okay.
Yeah. So it was a great last date. I still haven't eaten out again after that. It was so sad. But anyway, then quarantine happened, and me and this guy had to like come up with a plan. Like, okay, so what are we gonna do? Are we like gonna FaceTime each other now, or are we like gonna keep seeing each other? And I really wanted to see him. He really wanted to see me, and we figured like we had already been seeing each other weekly. So like once the quarantine started, it's like we already infected each other if we had the virus at this point, because I didn't go into quarantine until later too, like almost April, because I was working. Yeah. So my quarantine was already late enough where it's like if he had it or I had it, we would have already infected each other. I don't see how like us keeping to see each other at the same rate is really gonna change anything. So we kept seeing each other, but like like we didn't see anyone else. Like the only other person that I saw was you, I think.
And your parents.
Not even.
Oh, not even.
I didn't
in
really
the beginning,
see no,
not even.
It was you. Like if I was gonna get the virus, it was gonna be from him or you. That's it.
Yeah.
And the same with him. I think it was me or his brother that he like occasionally saw, and that was it because he was working from home. I'm sorry. By the way, I did get the virus. But I'm pretty sure I got it before even quarantine, because it was like the week after my first week working from home. So I probably got it from like the subway or something.
Yeah, I mean, I got it from my roommate most likely, because he had it in February, and then shortly after I got sick, we had the same symptoms. And then when I did the antibody testing, it came back positive, and then the COVID came back negative. So it's done.
And also, I know for a fact that my coronavirus wasn't from him, because he hasn't gotten it to this day. He actually did an antibody test not that long ago, and it came out negative.
Interesting.
And he also did the COVID test, and it was negative. So yeah, so I think the way that Corona helped is because once we had that settled, where we knew we were gonna keep seeing each other, then we started seeing each other a lot and at home. And there's something about like welcoming someone into your home that way, where like I expected him weekly at this point, and we would like cook together. So I feel like quarantine almost added to the relationship the part that it was missing, which was more like a homey feel, like being comfortable with each other, like without having to be like flashy or like dressing up super nice. You know what I mean? So it added that aspect that it was missing before. Like it no longer was like a dude that I would go on dates with. It was more like spending quality time together. So I think in that way it really helped us come closer and stuff like that. So that's how it was good. I don't know if I should keep going with the story.
No, so that was your pandemic partner.
That was my pandemic partner. And then I would say the whole time that I was in the old apartment was good. But then around the time that I started moving here, also that relationship like changed. Right now we're on friend terms for various reasons. I don't know.
Good reasons though that you're
good
protecting
reasons.
yourself
good
from.
Reasons.
Yeah.
That I think we should talk about how I came to those conclusions of like how to treat this relationship moving forward. In another episode, I want to explain like why I decided to take that relationship and make it into a friendship instead, even though there was nothing seemingly wrong with it. In fact, it was really good, and I'm happy it happened, and I still want to be in touch with this person. But there's like more emotional depth to it that I don't want to unpack right now. But I think that's like a whole other episode anyway, with like a therapist.
Yeah, and
we have a therapy episode coming soon with a real therapist, so stay tuned.
Yeah, and then I'll get to talk about the second part, because mine didn't pan out during the pandemic. So then I was talking, putting myself out there, so it was super different.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that happened after that guy for you.
Yes. Actually, I'm very happy that like ended during the beginning of the pandemic, and we got to go on our little nice dates and then be done with it, because then I concentrated on the moving, my company, and all those other things. So, and then your creative projects. And also, like, since we're kind of wrapping up now, if you also want to hear more about Bianca's pandemic story, because she did go through like a different process of looking for apartments and things, you should check out her documentary.
I actually just finished it yesterday, so we'll leave the link. Well, yesterday in the past of when you're watching this video. But anyway,
it'll be up.
We're gonna leave the link below in the description for this episode so you can watch it. It's like a vlog type documentary, and I go into full detail about all my moving craziness.
Yeah, so if you wanted to go more in depth, that's more structured, and like the storytelling is so
Do you think
good.
you'll have your
I make a cameo in there too, so watch it.
So I hope you guys like that, and I also hope you like this first episode of season 2, and we'll see you soon in this new set.